Good morning and welcome, everyone. The goal of today's workshop is to provide all of you with the tools and skills necessary to continue to develop your language and content objectives according to the new language and literacy program. Since the initial launch, many of our colleagues here at UNIS have been experiencing improvements in their classrooms as a result of using the new language and content objectives in their planning and instruction. However, acknowledging that not everyone feels they have a strong grasp on how to write the new objectives, today's workshop will help strengthen your understanding of and application of these new language objectives, with the expectation that our English language learner population will ultimately benefit, and we will see an improvement in MEP scores. Next year, I would like to begin this morning by asking you to share the multitude of experiences you have had to date using the language and literacy objectives with your students. The name of this activity is called the Rotating Trio Exchange. In a minute, I am going to ask you to count off by 8 forming groups of 3. Each trio will form a mini circle within a larger circle of all 8 groups. After discussing the initial question projected on the screen, your group will assign 0, 1, or 2 to each of your members. 1s will rotate one group to the left, 2s will rotate 2 groups to the left, and 0s will remain seated, so that each time there is a rotation, new groups will be formed. Then I will display the next discussion question. Okay, are there any questions? How many questions will we discuss, and how much time will we have for each question? You will have 3 to 4 minutes for each of the 3 discussion questions. I will guide you through the process as we go along. If we can begin counting off from my right, please. Very good. Now that we are in our initial groups, you may begin to discuss the first question. When you hear the chime, please end your discussion and get ready to rotate. Question 1. Do you feel you have been given enough training to properly write and carry out the language and literacy content and language objectives? Even though the training was very thorough, I am still having difficulty formulating language objectives that are not mirrors of my content objectives. I believe many of your fellow colleagues feel the same way. Please let me know if your feelings have changed by the end of today's session. Now, please assign 0s, 1s, and 2s to your trio. Okay, 1s please rotate to the left 1 group, 2s please rotate to the left, but 2 groups over. 0s you stay where you are. Please discuss the next question. I hope that you were all able to express your personal thoughts, concerns, and successes with one another through our opening activity. Please keep those in mind as we move into the main event. We will be splitting into 2 groups for a synergetic learning experience for the next 2 hours or so. Each group will experience today's activities in a different way and will be able to share their differing experiences toward the end. What I need now is for those of you who were in the first 4 groups to please find a seat closer to the front of the room. You all will be remaining here for the first portion of our activity. The rest of you please stand up and exit to your right. You will be meeting in the orange planning room for the first half of our activity. What will we be doing in the orange planning room? You all will be writing language and literacy language objectives and content objectives for 4 lessons, based on your grade level and subject area, using the objective stems we have provided for you. You will focus only on writing the objectives rather than the purpose and process. My assistant will be there waiting to give you further instructions. Sounds good. See you soon. Alright, let's get started. We are going to take a more detailed look at the language and literacy concept and the importance of meaningful tasks with measurable objectives. Please turn your attention to the front of the room as we will be following a PowerPoint presentation. On our first slide, the objectives for our workshop today are written out in the format of our language and literacy objectives. Our content objective tells us what we, as learners, will do as well as the meaningful task. Our language objective describes how we will demonstrate the mastery of this skill through reading, writing, speaking, or listening. Slide 3 goes through each section of the objectives. Notice that they are slightly different. For content and language, the what is the same for both objectives. It is always the specific standard being taught. For the why, we list the level of blooms that we are addressing. For our language objective, we want the why to address the development of language domains. Finally, the how for either objective is what I should see if I were to walk in during this lesson. It is the specific, meaningful task that the student will be working on. Slide 5 gives you a shortened version of what we just went over. There is a copy of this chart in your language and literacy workbook that you can use as a reference sheet. Finally, slide 7, you can see the sentence frames for the objectives. On the last 2 slides are examples of objectives written for a standard being taken through the levels of cognition. Having watched the presentation and gone more in depth as to how the language and literacy objectives promote deeper understanding as well as academic language development, are there any other questions you might have? Mrs. Gray, in both the objectives, content and language, the standard is the same. One of the concerns that quite a few people expressed in the earlier activity was the repetitiveness in the objectives. What is the difference between the two and why are they both necessary? Great question, Miss Young. Both objectives should address the same standard, yes. The difference between the two is that the content objective addresses how and what they will learn. The language objective addresses how they will communicate or express that they have learned it. They are both necessary so that the students are learning through meaningful tasks and then communicating and are expressing the knowledge they have gained with academic language. Thank you. That makes sense now. No problem. I'm happy that we could clear that up. Now, it's time for you all to switch places with our other group. If you could all make your way down to the orange planning room, you will now work on writing the objectives that we just learned more about. Now that we have all reconvened and each group has completed both portions of today's training, let's take a moment to reflect. I would like for each person to find a partner who is not in their group. Please discuss your experience, what you learned, and how your experiences may have differed based on the order in which you learned the information today. I will give you 2 minutes. Would anyone like to share something they discussed with their partner? My partner and I found that the order in which we attended the training sessions gave us each a different perspective. I attended the PowerPoint first and then used what I learned to write the objectives. My partner, however, found that she had a point of reference while going through the PowerPoint, having just practiced writing the objectives. She was able to self-correct as she learned from the PowerPoint presentation. That's great. And I hope that you will now be able to help one another having had such different experiences. Thank you for sharing. We will now transition into our closing activity as we are nearing the end of our training today. Everyone, please put yourselves into groups based on your grade level and subject area, and discuss your plan on moving forward with the new L&L objective format. I would like to have one person from each group to volunteer a problem they had faced with understanding, writing, or implementing the L&L objective. Format less than tag. It equals to duration equals 0/greater than. My group is working on the early childhood literacy objectives. We started with 4-year-old children will demonstrate their understanding that words are sounds and letters are symbols for words as well as the correlation between symbols, sounds and pictures. Is this a good objective? Yes, definitely. Students will be able to demonstrate the ability to use writing implements to form the symbols needed for pre-reading, pre-literacy, and literacy skills. Thank you for sharing information, Miss Gray. All groups got together and shared their suggestions to refine the using of the language and literacy objectives. Our new language objectives: our children will develop vocabulary skills, distinguish different word sounds, recognize letter shapes and sounds, enhance their understanding of community around them, learn to follow oral directions, learn to categorize familiar objectives. Thank you all for participating in this PD. Please make you all share your contact info so you can continue supporting one another while moving forward, and so you will be able to consult each other in future situations concerning an issue.